There are things in this world that we choose to ignore. We tell ourselves that the floorboard creaked because the house is settling. We tell ourselves that the shadow in the corner was just a trick of the light. We do this because the alternative is too terrifying to accept. The alternative is that we are not alone in the dark. Tonight I have 4 bone-chilling stories that will make you question every sound you hear tonight. These are true accounts of ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary, life-threatening situations. From delivery drivers lured into traps to campers who realized the woods were watching them. These stories are a reminder that safety is fragile. So, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's get started. I was 22 years old, working as a pizza delivery driver to pay for college. It wasn't a glamorous job, but the tips were decent, especially on weekends. I worked in a suburban town that bordered on a lot of dense, undeveloped woodland. It was a Tuesday night, raining hard, the kind of rain that makes it impossible to see 5 feet in front of your car. Around 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes before closing, an order came through. It was for 3 large pepperoni pizzas. The address was weird, though. It was for a house on Blackwood Road. I had lived in this town my whole life, and I knew Blackwood Road. It was a dead-end street with only 3 houses, and they were all spaced about half a mile apart. I loaded the pizzas into the passenger seat and started driving. The rain was pounding against the windshield. When I turned onto Blackwood Road, the streetlights ended. It was pitch black. The GPS led me to the very end of the road, to a house I had never delivered to before. It was a massive, 2-story Victorian house that looked like it hadn't been painted in 50 years. The windows were dark, no porch light, no cars in the driveway. The lawn was overgrown, knee-high grass swaying in the wind. I double-checked the receipt. This was definitely the place. I grabbed the heat bag and ran through the rain to the porch. The wood creaked loudly under my boots. I rang the doorbell. I didn't hear a chime inside. I knocked on the heavy oak door. "Pizza delivery," I shouted over the sound of the rain. Nothing. I waited a minute and knocked again, harder this time. I was getting soaked and I just wanted to get this over with. As I raised my hand to knock a 3rd time, I noticed something. The door wasn't fully latched. It was cracked open just a sliver. My instinct was to leave right then, but I needed the tip. I pushed the door open a few inches. "Hello? Is anyone home?" The inside of the house was completely empty. I don't mean no people. I mean no furniture, no carpet, just bare wood floors and peeling wallpaper. The only light came from the street lamp far down the road, casting long, stretched shadows across the floor. Then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the pizza shop manager. "Hey man," he said, sounding panicked. "Are you at the Blackwood house?" "Yeah," I said, eyeing the dark staircase inside. "But it looks abandoned. I don't think anyone lives here." "Get out of there," my manager said, his voice trembling. "We just got a call from the police. That order was placed from a burner phone. The call didn't come from inside the house. It came from the woods across the street." My blood ran cold. I spun around to look at the woods behind my car. Standing at the edge of the tree line, illuminated by my headlights, were 3 figures. They were wearing dark hoodies and they were holding something metal. Crowbars? Bats? I couldn't tell. But they weren't moving. They were just watching me standing on the porch. I dropped the pizzas right there on the wet wood and sprinted to my car. As I fumbled with the door handle, one of them let out a high-pitched whistle and they started sprinting toward me. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it just as a heavy object smashed against the rear window. The glass shattered, showering the back seat in shards. I slammed on the gas, tires spinning in the mud, and fishtailed out of the driveway. I sped down that dark road at 80 miles an hour, not stopping until I reached the police station. They never caught the guys. The police said it was likely a gang initiation or a robbery setup. But what haunts me isn't the guys in the woods. It's the fact that when I was standing on that porch, looking into the empty house, I swear I heard heavy breathing coming from the darkness at the top of the stairs. I think the bait wasn't just the pizza. I think I was supposed to go inside. This next story comes from a woman who loves solo camping, or at least she used to. I've always been an outdoorsy person. There is something peaceful about being miles away from cell service, emails, and the noise of the city. Last October, I decided to take a solo trip to a national forest in Oregon. I hiked about 6 miles off the main trail to find a secluded spot near a small creek. I set up my tent, made a small fire, and cooked dinner. The sun went down around 7 p.m., and the forest instantly transformed. If you've never been deep in the woods at night, it's a different world. The silence is heavy. Around 10 p.m., I put out the fire and crawled into my sleeping bag. I was reading a book with my headlamp on when I heard it. Footsteps. Not the frantic scurrying of a squirrel or the heavy trot of a deer. These were slow, deliberate, two-legged footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They were circling my tent. I froze, turning off my headlamp instantly. I lay there in the dark, holding my breath, clutching the bear spray I kept by my pillow. The footsteps stopped right behind where my head was resting. There was only a thin layer of nylon fabric between me and whoever was out there. I waited for a voice. I waited for someone to say, "Hello? Is anyone in there?" But there was nothing. Just silence. Then a hand dragged slowly down the side of the tent. The fabric hissed as the fingers trailed over it. It sounded like dirty, rough nails scratching against the material. My heart was hammering so hard I thought they could hear it. The scratching stopped and the footsteps started again. They walked away, fading into the distance. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay there with my knife in one hand and the spray in the other. When the sun finally came up, I unzipped the tent slowly, looking around. The campsite was empty. I packed up my gear in record time, desperate to get back to my car. As I was taking down the tent, I noticed something that made me vomit. On the back of the tent, right where my head had been sleeping, there was a slash mark. Someone had taken a knife and cut a clean slit in the fabric. It was about 4 inches long. It wasn't big enough to get in, but it was big enough to look inside. Whoever had been walking around my tent hadn't just dragged their hand across it. They had cut it open. They had stood there, in the middle of the night, watching me sleep through that hole, inches from my face. And I never even knew. I hiked back to my car without stopping for water. I haven't gone camping since. The third story is a reminder that you never really know who you are inviting into your life. I was moving into a new apartment and needed a couch. Being on a tight budget, I scoured Craigslist for deals. I found a listing for a nice leather sectional for only $50. The description said, "Moving sale, must go today." It seemed like a steal. I emailed the seller and he replied almost instantly. He gave me an address in a nice neighborhood, which put me at ease. I asked my friend Dave to come with me to help lift it, mostly because I didn't want to go to a stranger's house alone. We arrived at the house around 6 p.m. It was a normal suburban home, well-kept lawn, nice car in the driveway. A man answered the door. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing a polo shirt and khakis. He introduced himself as Greg. He seemed a little jittery, talking very fast, blinking a lot, but I figured he was just stressed about moving. "The couch is in the basement," he said, gesturing for us to come in. I hesitated. "Is there any way we can bring it up here to look at it?" Greg laughed, a sharp barking sound. "It's too heavy for just me. I need you strong guys to help me carry it up." Dave shrugged, so we followed him. We walked through the kitchen, which was spotless. Too spotless. There were no personal items anywhere. No mail on the counter, no magnets on the fridge, no dishes in the sink. It looked like a model home. We got to the basement door. Greg opened it and flipped a switch, but the light didn't come on. Bulb must be blown, he muttered. Don't worry, there's a light at the bottom of the stairs. He started descending into the darkness. Dave and I looked at each other. Something felt wrong. The air coming up from the basement smelled terrible. It smelled like bleach and rot, a sickly sweet chemical mix. Come on down, Greg called out from the darkness. His voice echoed, sounding different now. Deeper, less friendly. Actually, I called back, I think we're going to pass. Sorry to waste your time. I grabbed Dave's arm and turned to leave. Suddenly, we heard heavy footsteps thundering up the wooden stairs behind us. Greg wasn't walking. He was charging. We sprinted for the front door. I grabbed the handle and twisted. It was locked. Open it, Dave screamed. I fumbled with the deadbolt. Behind us, Greg burst out of the basement doorway. He was holding a hammer. The polite suburban dad act was gone. His face was twisted in pure rage. He didn't say a word. He just raised the hammer and lunged at us. I managed to turn the lock and threw the door open. We spilled out onto the front lawn just as the hammer swung down, smashing into the door frame where my head had been a second ago. We ran to my truck and sped off. As we drove away, I looked back. Greg was standing on the porch, still holding the hammer, watching us leave. He wasn't chasing us. He was just standing there, perfectly still. We called the police. Later that night, an officer called me back. They had gone to the house. The man, Greg, wasn't the owner. The real owners were an elderly couple who were on vacation in Florida. Greg had broken in, lived there for a few days, and posted ads online to lure people over. And the worst part? When police searched the basement, they didn't find a couch. They found a plastic tarp laid out on the floor, a set of surgical tools, and a video camera set up on a tripod, pointing at the center of the room. If we had gone down those stairs, we never would have come back up. Our final story tonight comes from a night shift nurse named Sarah. I work 3 12-hour shifts a week at a hospital, usually getting home around 4 a.m. I live in a basement apartment in the city. The windows are at ground level, facing the sidewalk. I usually keep the blinds closed tight, but on hot summer nights, I leave the window cracked open a few inches for airflow. I have a security bar installed so it can't open more than that. One night last summer, I came home exhausted. I threw my scrubs in the hamper, took a quick shower, and collapsed into bed. I fell asleep almost instantly. I woke up around 10 a.m. because my room felt unusually hot. My throat was dry. I sat up and reached for my water bottle. That's when I noticed the window. The blinds were pulled up, and the window was wide open. The security bar was lying on the floor. Confusion washed over me. I distinctly remembered checking the lock before I left for work, and I hadn't touched it when I got home. I got up and walked over to the window. The screen had been carefully cut out and removed. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone and backed out of the bedroom, checking the rest of the apartment. Nothing seemed to be missing. My laptop was on the table. My purse was on the hook. I called the police, and while waiting for them, I remembered I had installed a motion-activated pet camera in my bedroom to check on my cat while I was at work. I opened the app on my phone and scrolled back through the footage. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. At 4:45 a.m., about 30 minutes after I had fallen asleep, the blinds slowly lifted. A pair of gloved hands worked the window open. A man slid silently into my room. He was dressed all in black. He didn't look for valuables. He didn't go into the living room. He stood by the side of my bed for 10 minutes, just watching me sleep. He leaned in close, inches from my face, and I could see him whispering something, though the camera didn't pick up the audio. Then he did something that made me scream. He didn't leave through the window. He dropped to the floor and slid under my bed. I fast-forwarded the footage. 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. He never came out. I was standing in the living room watching this video on my phone. The video ended at the current time. The man was still under the bed. I was standing 10 feet away from him. I didn't even grab my shoes. I ran out the front door barefoot and didn't stop running until I reached the coffee shop down the block. When the police arrived with their guns drawn, they found him. He was still under there. He had zip ties, duct tape, and a rag soaked in chloroform in his pockets. He was waiting for me to wake up. I moved out the next day. I broke my lease, lost my deposit, and I didn't care. I sleep in a third-floor apartment now, and I never, ever open the windows. These stories serve as a grim reminder. We build walls and lock doors to keep the world out, but sometimes the monsters find a way in. They hide in empty houses. They wait in the woods. They lure us with false promises. And sometimes they wait patiently beneath the very place we dream. So tonight, before you close your eyes, take a look around your room. Check the closet. Check the lock on the window. And maybe, just maybe, take a quick look under the bed. If you have a story you want to share, or if you survived something similar, let me know in the comments. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you in the next video.